Hi, everyone. Welcome to Please Excuse My OCD. Today, I have my friend Sofia Loporcaro. Sofia is one of the coolest people that I've met, and she has a podcast called Before the Chorus, where she interviews musicians who talk about their lived experience as musicians and their own lived experience with whether that's mental illness or just their lives in general. She is an award-winning music journalist, and I'm always super excited to have someone who has a podcast on this podcast because we're just two people who just ask pretty good questions. I hope that I'll be able to ask some good questions here. But she got diagnosed with OCD at the age of 11. And this is something that she has been learning about throughout her life. And of course, through her career as a music journalist and podcast host. And so I'm just super excited to have Sofia here today to answer some of my questions and talk about her experience with OCD. So thank you so much for being here, Sofia.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell the people who are listening really about your story with OCD and kind of its prevalence in your life.
Yeah. Oof. Start with the big
Yeah.
question. Um,
Yes. A general question.
how do I start? And also, what is the highlight reel of my
Yeah.
OCD over the years? Well, I was diagnosed with OCD when I was 11 years old. Um, I was definitely like an odd kid growing up. It was funny. I was just in Montreal, which is my hometown, and I was talking to a friend that I've known since I was little, and she like remembered something about me that I didn't even remember. Apparently, I used to like sing to myself in class. I don't know if that's an OCD thing or just generic neurodivergent stuff, but I guess I've always kind of colored outside the lines a little bit, and then I definitely started getting some like I guess like kind of hypochondria type themes like very like health related OCD
Mm.
stuff probably when I was like 10 or something. And I still remember one time I was like trying to sleep and my heart was pounding and I kept having this fear of like I'm going to have like a heart attack or like some kind of heart failure or something. And I kept going down to see my parents and being like I'm really scared, like could this be something bad? Like am I okay? Oh my god. And then I remember them telling me they're like I think we want to take you to see a psychologist. And this was like 16, 17 years ago when the conversation around OCD was nowhere near where it is now and just around mental health in general. So like the first
Sure.
thought in my like preteen head was, oh, my parents think I'm crazy and they want to put me in a padded cell. Like that's
Yep.
kind of where my brain was. And so that first thought of going to therapy was very shameful. It was very like, oh, I'm broken.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I very quickly realized that, therapy is amazing. I've been extremely fortunate over the years that even as I've moved cities and even countries and I've had to switch therapists, I've found really good ones. I think definitely people that are, very equipped to deal with OCD specifically, which is so key. Um, and so I quickly, became, I guess I started going to therapy very regularly. It really helped me, and like I've dealt with it in waves over the years. I think that's kind of normal. As we know, OCD is a lifelong thing.
Yes.
Um but yeah, having access to therapy has helped. I've tried as I've gotten older and as the conversation has opened up more to be more outspoken about OCD as best as I can. Part for my own healing's sake, because like reducing the shame around it helps me to feel
Yes.
less ashamed of myself and feel less ashamed around other people around it. But also, I want to talk about it for the sake of other people that are dealing with it, because I was also bullied a lot in school, and I can definitely trace back things that I was bullied for to things that were probably caused by my OCD that the other kids didn't understand. Like I remember
Gotcha.
having a panic attack once in class because I forgot my homework, and they just thought like, oh, she's such a nerd. She's like freaking out about her homework, and
Mm,
that was great with the other kids in high school. That went
yeah.
so good. Yeah, I feel like this is such a like tangent filled way to talk about my journey with OCD, but
I love it.
it's like 17 years worth of stuff, so it's kind of hard to kind of
Yeah.
yeah, pick it
Yeah.
out.
I mean, that was incredible. I think that was a really nice, like, and you segued really well into different places throughout the OCD journey.
Yay.
So, but like, I mean, I'm listening to you talk about your experience, especially growing up with it and not understanding it. And like, huge kudos to your parents for being like, hey, let's see what's going on here. Because I feel like even that might have been a little far fetched like 10, 20 years ago. Because,
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but like I grew up in a community that was very much like, oh, like suck it up, stop thinking about it. You're not busy enough, like that kind of mentality, which is like super
Mm.
detrimental.
So
Um,
much, yeah. The not busy enough, my God. I think
yeah,
the reason I got lucky is because there's another member of my family who, I won't like pinpoint who it is exactly because
sure.
it's a public platform and that's
Hmm.
their option to how widely they want to speak about it. But
Hmm.
they were diagnosed with OCD 10 years prior to me. And so fortunately, I think my parents recognized what was happening with me based on what had happened to this other member of the family. So I think I really just got lucky. Now, also to my parents' credit, I'm very close with my family. They are wonderful human beings. And I think my parents are very willing to like learn and kind of humble themselves and, be receptive instead of being like, it has to be this way, which again, I do not take that for granted because there are so many points in my journey with OCD that like I got really lucky to get put on the right path, whether it be with therapy or with like family and friends. Um, but yeah, that having someone else in my family who already had it and my parents having witnessed that, I think was really helpful.
Seeing it in someone else, knowing the facts and being able to assess. I mean, that's so huge. There's so many stories of people who get misdiagnosed for so long, and it's something. Even when you said that having an OCD specialist in therapy is important because you can be diagnosed with OCD. Like I was diagnosed at a very young age, but I didn't have the right therapist until I was in my 20s
Oh
who was
no.
like, hey, like the things that you're focusing on now, that's because of your OCD. And I was like, what? So that is such an important key. And I think, are you willing to talk about your experience, like, like finding an OCD therapist? Was that hard like years ago or?
I mean, it's kind of hard to say because I was young enough that I wasn't really, at the in the driver's seat of that
Mm-hmm.
process of finding a therapist. I I don't know if all of my therapists over the years have specifically been CBT therapists, but I've always at the
Mm-hmm.
very least like at least when I've been in control of looking for a therapist, I've looked for people that specialize with OCD. I will say I really particularly like my therapist currently, and she does very much specialize in CBT and ERP therapy, which
Mm.
is, again, I know we talk about it being the gold standard for OCD, but it really, really, really is. She's been able to kind of like bring me back to earth and kind of get me to the core of things without it being like a rumination process, which is awesome. But yeah, I don't know. Again, I think I've been very lucky that whether again it be just sheer luck that I've landed on the right people or what or what, but I've
Yeah,
had some really incredible therapists over the years who have really, really helped me.
that's huge. I'm so happy
Yeah.
to hear that because even in the therapy realm, there's still a stigma around certain things. And throughout the different forms of like OCD that you've had, have you been able to like get to a place where you can recognize now, like, okay, this is what I'm doing, or like this, I'm seeking like reassurance now, like room, like have you gotten to a place where you're able to like recognize when that's happening?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't always stop me from doing it, you know. I
Hmm.
mean, which I think is, you know, normal for all of us. It's like I know
Yeah.
this is exactly what I'm doing, but I can't like help it.
Yeah.
Like on the days where it's tougher, that's normal, especially with because like I mean, you mentioned a big point, which is that OCD goes after the unknown. No human being loves uncertainty, but those of us
Yeah.
with OCD are crippled by uncertainty.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we know it goes for but I learned this that there's a word for it. I think it's like ego dystonic or something.
Yes.
Like
Yep.
it
That's
goes
exactly it.
after, yeah, it goes after your values, the things that connect to your identity, the things that make you happy. Like it really attacks those, and that sucks. That's kind of the worst part of OCD, when it makes you feel disconnected from yourself. And even
Yes.
if you know it's OCD, that feeling of anxiety that just takes over your body can be so
Hmm.
strong that it's hard to sit with. Like, you know, I've mentioned to you
Hmm.
before, I've dealt with relationship OCD. I think I finally realized that I have this subtype. It's
Hmm.
funny, even with all the therapy and the fact that I have great therapists, there are certain things in the last like year and a half that I've realized from my past to present that are OCD related. And like
Yes.
and how specifically they are, which has been great because it's meant that I can finally undo them and give myself some grace. But I'm going to use a sort of side example, but it works well as a sort of comparison to relationship OCD because it's a different theme but works the same way.
Hmm.
When and this has to do with my job in music. So when I a few years ago, whenever I go to concerts and I'd start to get a little bit restless because I have a shit attention span. Also, if I can't swear, let me know. But
Oh, we love to say fuck and shit here, so it's fine.
yay, fuck shit, fuck shit, fuck shit, fuck.
Yeah.
On my podcast too, and then like I'll be
Yeah.
talking to my mom after, and she'll be like, "That was such a good episode. Why do you swear so much?"
Yeah. That is so true. I get the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just
bless.
not
I
even
lived in
malicious. It's just like natural,
no,
you know?
I like swearing.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's so
I
funny.
don't know. I lived in England for 3 years. I learned from them, so I swear like a
Yeah.
sailor now.
Let's blame them for sure.
Yeah, the English, and I also have Scottish friends. They're even worse.
Oh my gosh, that is
Oh
so
yeah.
funny. No, you're
So
welcome
that
to just be yourself and talk how you'd like.
yay.
Yeah.
That makes me very happy.
I'm
Yay.
glad. I'm glad.
But yeah, so I have a shit attention span, and
Yeah.
that's definitely a symptom of OCD because we have very active brains. So
Yes.
your brain gets tired quickly.
Hmm.
And so I started getting this intrusive thought that was telling me, you don't actually want to be here. You're you don't actually like going to concerts. You just want to be cool, and you're a poser and you're an imposter. And that feeling would overwhelm me and would make me really upset, and then it would ruin gigs for me. And every time I'd be at a gig, I'd have that like thought screaming in my head. And I remember telling someone that I knew about it once, was like, I always get like fidgety at concerts. And they actually were like, maybe you don't actually like it that much. And then
Which is like an exposure in itself.
it is an exposure, but I didn't know that it was that.
Right.
So it kind of was similar to like when you get a therapist that's not equipped with OCD, it almost like validates the OCD thought because they don't recognize it as an
Yeah.
OCD thought, which is so bad. Um,
Keeps you in that cycle for sure.
it does because it like almost it validates the OCD thought instead of kind of validating uncertainty. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tricky because you don't know what to do with it. You can't treat it as an exposure. You kind of treat it as a fact, essentially.
Right. Right.
And that sent me into spirals for years. And it made me think, do I actually hate my job? Am I ever going to be happy doing anything? It connected a lot with my depression as well because I started getting really existential. I was like, if I don't like this, will I ever like anything? Um,
Yes.
it connected to my work. Like if I felt like fidgety, like editing my podcast, or I felt bored, or
Yeah.
I was avoiding my work because I was stressed and overthinking, I get that you don't really like this and you're lying to yourself thought constantly.
Hmm.
And it was luckily through a bit of like, I guess, sort of exposure therapy, and also my therapist really teaching me that like two feelings can be true at the same time, and also they can coexist without canceling each other out. And also that like a lot of the things that are worth doing in life aren't always happy and magical and perfect. And so I don't
Yeah.
know. It all that to say, like, I guess one, to come back to this idea that like OCD really does attack the things that we love. Because like I
Yeah.
love my work. I'm so deeply fulfilled by it,
Hmm.
but it doesn't make it easy every day, you
Of
know?
course.
There's sort of a deeper sense of feeling like fulfilled by it. And I connect that back with relationship OCD because I think it works in a very similar vein of like, you know, you're like, am I actually attracted to this person that I'm dating?
Hmm.
I don't feel this like intense spark every single second of every day, or,
Yeah.
you know, today I'm bored or today I'm annoyed with them. That means I don't actually
Yes.
like them anymore. Like,
It's just so exhausting
it is.
because these are things you can't avoid these kinds of things, especially if you want to live that fulfilling life of
Yeah.
like having a career you love or being with someone that's really good for you and that you actually do love and care about.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so, oh,
If my dog agrees.
she wants to, yeah, she agrees for sure.
What
She's
are
so
you
cute.
barking at? Sorry, everyone. This is Sally.
We
This
love
this
Sally. We want Sally to voice her opinion.
she's
Yeah.
very good for my mental health, but also she's crazy.
Oh, she is so cute. She is so
Have
cute.
Get a pet. It's good for your brain, but also it's nice.
Yeah. I tell people the
She
same thing.
I think I have a dog that also has anxiety and probably her own like, I don't know, ADHD or something. Like she has zero attention span and all the energy in the world.
Well,
Um
you do end up attracting very like-minded beings, so maybe.
Clearly.
There was something interesting that you said about, so you work in music. You said you're okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, from the outside, like, because I understand I work in music too. From the outside, anybody would be like, "Oh, that's so cool," and but it is cool. But there's a lot of aspects that come to working in music that can make it very uncool sometimes.
Totally. Yeah.
Um,
That's
Go
true for
ahead.
every career though. Like I said, anything that is fulfilling in some capacity is going to come with some bullshit, and
Yeah.
that's just how it is. And I think for, I mean, everyone can like question, you know, if it's worth doing a thing, but I think for people without OCD, more likely than not, they're like, you know, people don't get how hard it is, but that doesn't make it any less worthwhile for me. With
Hmm.
OCD, you start to internalize all this like external shit and be like, maybe I can't trust my own brain. Maybe I am, you know, I don't actually like this and I am just lying to myself. And ironically, we're often the people that are the most in tune with our brains because we stay in them and just, you know,
It's so
deconstruct
true.
every single fucking thing.
Yep, it's
Um,
so true. And you said that you
yeah.
got existential too. Like
Oh
the
my God. Yeah.
existential part is like I relate heavily because I had existential OCD, which was so terrifying.
Oh
But
my God. That was the worst one for me by far.
really,
Oh yeah. It's because it coincided with depression,
yep.
and the two can definitely easily go hand in hand. It happened also when I had just graduated from university, which is an existential, you know, mess in and of itself.
Yes.
It's like
A
a lot of things
milestone.
come. Yeah. And it's, you go, especially like going from an environment that's so structured that you're in for like 20 odd years of your life, you know,
Yep.
where it's like you always know when certain things are going to happen, when certain deadlines are going to come in. There's a certain type of like gratification you get when you get your grades back and you know that you're going to get it. You like, I was a very, I'm smart and I was a good student, so like I knew that I was going to get that gratification to some degree,
Yes.
and so it was all certain. And then all of a sudden it was like, and here you go. Like,
Yeah. Go out there
go
now.
and be in the world now. You've never done this before, at least not since
Yeah.
you were, you know, a toddler. And that was
Hmm.
different for many obvious reasons.
Sure.
And now you're having to figure out, do you like your job? Are you able to function in this completely new structure? I was also living in England at the time, and my parents live in Texas. And so they were like a
Wow.
10-hour flight away. All of my friends, we were all like freelancers. And so we just never see each other because our schedules coincided. So it was also isolated. It was, it was a, it was a time.
Yeah, a
So
doozy.
yeah. Oh God. Yeah. That was very fertile ground for existential OCD to
Yeah.
rear its ugly head.
That is so interesting to me because mine happened at when I turned 25, another milestone where it's like, what are you expected to do? What's the next step? What are the answers? What are we doing here? You know? And so I'm wondering if you can relate to this because you bring up the point of depression and how they kind of coincide with each other. There was one point where I was getting text messages. I was in my friend's car on the way to get ice cream and I was getting um, somebody was texting me about something, and I had that intrusive thought of like, what's the point of me even responding to this? Because like in 30 billion years, the sun's going to explode, and there's no like, what's the point of any? Why am I making this music? Why am I even doing this podcast? Like, there's these thoughts like that really got to me, and I was like, what's the point, and why am I doing any of this? Like, what's the answer? Like, why do I even respond to the
Yeah.
text? You know what I mean? Have you felt that?
You're to a T. Like
Yeah.
you're describing what my brain was like for a solid like year and a half.
Yeah. It's
It was
terrifying.
that. It is. You're just like everything is pointless, and
Yeah.
it like warps your feeling. Like I'm someone that has such a like lust for life, and
Yeah.
like I love like there's not to say I don't know if this is like a for very lack of a better word positive side of this is like the way like I kind of love hyperfixating on cool shit. Like I
Mm-hmm.
love nerding out on little details and stuff. And so to suddenly be this person that was just like void, like everything felt so pointless. And it's crazy how much like OCD can like warp the way that you experience feelings. Like it can make you numb. It can make you feel disgusted by things. There's stuff
Mm-hmm.
like false attraction. Like and that shit's like the especially hard stuff to describe to people, and I think it's a big part of why it's so misunderstood. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've been there. The thing that one of the big things that really helped me get out of that was this sort of thought of, I mean, the thing I said about feelings coexisting, my therapist really helped me with that,
Mm-hmm.
but also this idea of like, even if all of this is pointless, why not do it anyway? Like
I love that.
it's kind of like, we kind of get this opportunity with life to fill it with so many things. I think when you're fully immersed in the OCD state, the idea of this big, vast, like unknown life ahead of you is terrifying. You're like, what am I going to do with all of this? What do I do on the days that are hard? What do I do when I feel like I can't get like fulfillment from anything? And but
Yes.
slowly but surely, and again it took a long time. Like I was in the throes of this for again a good year and a half before I really like got myself out of the hole
Wow.
of, oh yeah, like existential OCD is a rough one.
Yeah. I was going to ask you
And
like what that was for you, that got like really the first step to getting you out of the hole. But you kind of answered that with like your therapist being like, hey, you can
yeah,
experience two different things. But do you remember a turning point for existential OCD for yourself?
again that was a big one, her teaching
Yeah.
me that, because it just took so much power away from the OCD. She also
Mm-hmm.
uses this really great analogy of like imagining your like brain or like your vessel for emotions like a school bus, and often like emotions will get on and off the bus. um Often they will stay on the bus, just sometimes they'll sit at different parts of the bus. Like often at their worst, OCD and depression will sit at the front and they'll scream at you and you're like the driver, but
Mm-hmm.
like your joy and your lust for life and all the other stuff is still on the bus. It's just sitting in the back.
I
It
love
may be
that.
quieter right now. It may be getting drowned out by this very loud, you know, these loud, intrusive thoughts, but it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And her kind of putting that idea in my head really helped, because it gave me hope that over time, it'll come back to the bus, and somewhere in all of this, I'm still me. That really helped. And then this is kind of a sadder note, but it was a big turning point for me, like a big wake up call moment. And it happened early into all of this, like maybe a couple months into that journey, but sometimes just like getting the waves of that feeling to go away takes a long time and a lot of sitting with it and a lot of exposure. But a band that I really love, I don't know if you've heard of them. They were called Hers. Actually, their music still goes viral often. They have a song called What Once Was that like
I
constantly
may
gets
have
picked
heard.
up. Yeah. Well, they were one of my favorite bands. And 5 years ago, and this is around the time that I was dealing with this existential OCD, they were killed in a car crash.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I had actually seen them and spoken to them a week and a half before they passed away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is
Because
wild.
yes. So I had interviewed them once for or not for my podcast, but for something else. And then I was at South by Southwest and they were playing. And actually, me and my friends were initially going to go to some like ABBA tribute gig, but there was too long of a line. So we're like, you know what, screw it. We're going to stay and watch Hers. And the only reason we didn't initially want to stay is because we'd all seen them a lot of times.
Yeah.
But we ended up staying. We were all like drunkenly dancing and having a great time. And it was such a fun show. And I went to talk to them after. They remembered me from like being interviewed by me a year prior. We had a great chat. And then they were like, hey, we're playing in Dallas after this. And I lived there at the time. They're like, do you want us to put you on the guest list? I was like, oh my God, I'd love that. Like, they were so nice. I saw them again a few days later. They ate at a restaurant that I suggested they go to for dinner, all this. And then a week and a half later, I opened my phone and someone from their management team posted that they had passed away in a car crash.
Wow.
Yeah, they're also on their first ever US tour. They're from Liverpool. And all of a sudden, even though I was feeling this feeling of like everything is pointless and I don't understand, all of a sudden I found myself grieving a death and being angry that someone's life was suddenly taken away. And that disconnect for me was a huge wake up call. There was something about that like hit somewhere deep of like, I'm suddenly so mad that these two incredible people, I mean, not only we're gonna not get to continue to live their lives, even though they were in their mid-20s when they died. Like,
Wow.
they were making so much amazing music. They were such a talented band. They were on the cusp of like leaving their mark. And all of a sudden I was like, all this art that they were gonna make is never gonna happen. I'm so worried people are going to forget about them after all the work and the time that they have put into this thing that they have created. And again, something about that clicked in my head of like, and it really just kind of reminded me of like the great potential of life. And like, yes, it's unknown and it's scary and it's uncharted territory, but there's also such an opportunity to fill it with beautiful things and beautiful experiences. And I don't want to ever miss that. As long as I have any part of this that I have control over, I want to be part of that lived experience. And I actually, you saw my tattoo. These
Yes.
two flowers here are actually the so their debut album had a bouquet of carnations and tulips on it. So I got a carnation and a tulip
Oh
as
wow.
the tattoo after they passed. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And yeah. So that was a huge turning point for me. Big wake up call.
Yeah. It's interesting how it sounds like it was so deep. Like you said, it was so deep for you. It hit a place that was like almost underneath your ego, like really far deep in there. And which kind of reinforces the fact that like maybe that's where OCD really operates, is just on the surface level of the ego, where it's like just about you and your body, your mind, your likes, your dislikes. You're grieving people who for a short time had this immense effect on you. Now that they're gone, you're like, wow, like really the existential part of that, of being like, wow, they are no longer here, but the effect is like continuing to ripple through me and through so many other people. I mean, what a beautiful, but like it's a catastrophic thing to experience, but what a beautiful side to that, to kind of like pull you out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, on a very small tangent, the hers fan community are still celebrating them, and it's been 5 years since they've passed away. Like they're still sharing their music,
Wow.
even though like music going viral is such a like frivolous thing. It's still
Sure.
kind of nice when I hear their music pop up again. I'll still sometimes be out at a restaurant and hear it playing. Like a
Wow.
lot of other people got like tattoos of them. I think they just like established a foundation, like their label established a foundation in their name. Like
Hmm.
it's still living on, and that's been such a beautiful thing to watch happen, of like so many people collectively being like, we refuse to forget about them and
Wow.
the art that they made, and we're not going to let them disappear, which is such a beautiful thing to witness as a human being. But what you're saying about like OCD being on like an ego level, I don't get this with everything, and I share this cautiously because I don't want people to feel like if you don't get this feeling, that means that the OCD is right. I don't think that's the case at all. But with certain things, I'll notice that it feels like somewhere deep below the cloud of OCD, there's this like deeper undercurrent that's like pulling me towards doing certain things, like the things that do really matter to me. Like, it's like whether it be like with my career and being like, you know, I am dealing with all this OCD and I feel numb or I feel burned out on a certain day, but something's pulling me to keep doing this. And I don't know what
Hmm.
it is, but I feel like I need to listen to it. And I feel like that's that other little thing at the back of the bus being like, no, no, keep doing this. And again, that doesn't happen with every single thing. And I don't want, again, other people out there with OCD to hear that and be like, I don't get this feeling, so that must mean my OCD is right.
Right.
Not
Right.
necessarily. I think it's such a case by case, it's a theme by theme, but it's
Yeah.
something I've experienced. It's the same I experience with like dating too. Like sometimes
Hmm.
even when I'm in my head, I'll still feel this pull of like something about this experience or this person is telling me to keep trying anyway.
The dating aspect um, is kind of interesting because, and if you let me know if you don't want to talk about this, but
Totally.
when I had ROCD, like at the height of my relationship OCD, I ran away, and this was something that I was unaware of until later on when I actually got the right help. But I started
Yeah.
to look back at my other relationships, and I was like, hang on, like this was happening in all of them, and the one that I truly felt the most connected to, this girl that I was with for a few years, I felt the most connected with was the time that it was the worst. And I didn't realize it until later when I got the right help that was like, hey, you were experiencing like some pretty severe relationship OCD.
Yeah.
Did you have a similar experience? Like, was that something that was kind of with you throughout your life, or did you find it in a particular place with a particular person?
Throughout my life,
Yeah.
I kind of, I've also realized you can have relationship OCD if you're single.
Mm.
Um, because it can happen in just dating in general, like just
Yeah.
going out and meeting people. And like I knew that I've always had a lot of anxiety around dating, um, but I didn't realize that it was part of this until very, very recently, like in the last few years. And so my thing was I just not talk to people at all. Like I'd hide myself away. Like I was very much like a late bloomer when it came to dating. And I didn't realize how big of a role OCD played in that. Because I was so afraid of either getting hurt or hurting someone else. I was like, I'm just gonna not say how I feel to people in the first place. I'm just
Yeah.
going to, yeah, lock myself in a box while at the same time feeling really lonely and really wanting to get myself out there. And it's so powerful when you finally name the thing. You're like, oh, this is what it is. And now I know how to deal with it and I know how to face it. And it's made a world of difference. Like, it doesn't mean I don't still get anxiety on some days. Like, that's normal,
Of course.
but I'm able to kind of do things anyway now and lead with curiosity. There's also an element of learning that how to trust yourself a little bit, which is hard with OCD because it makes you feel like you can't. But
Hmm.
one, I've realized trusting yourself doesn't mean that you're never going to make mistakes. And allowing trust to accommodate that is part of it. But I've also learned how to trust that, like, I'm always going to do my best to take care of myself, but I'm also always going to do my best to treat other people whether it be a friend or someone that I'm dating or whatever, like a human being. And I'm going to, as best as I can, give them the dignity that they deserve. And I might still make mistakes, but it realizing that kind of gave me a little more grace to be like, stop running away. Like, yes,
Yeah.
people are going to get hurt, but you're not going to be actively malicious because you know yourself. You wouldn't do that, you know?
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to look at it. And,
Mm-hmm.
realizing too, like you said it about the trusting yourself thing, that it's actually so imperative to make mistakes on the road to trusting yourself, because
Yes.
it's more about how you make the mistake and move forward and through it,
Yeah.
rather than just making the right decision all the time.
Massively.
Um,
Yeah.
so,
You have
so
to.
important.
And I think, it's so easy with OCD to, I mean, quite literally like catastrophize, it's one of
Yeah.
the great big symptoms. And
Yeah.
to be like, if I make this mistake, everything's over and everything's going to be bad. And which is another reason why I would just never like try. And I would just, again,
Hmm.
hide for so long. And then when I finally started to, stick my neck out and like approach people and date more, I got hurt pretty badly a few times.
Of
Like it
course.
sucked. Yeah, I've had some people or some men do some very unkind things towards me that really broke me. But at the same time, I wouldn't take them back because I learned so much from them. And it kind of woke me up to this idea that one, you have to live through mistakes to
Yeah.
learn. And it kind of became a weird form of exposure therapy in and of itself. And it doesn't mean, you just masochistically put yourself in harm's way, but more in the sense you just let yourself live and you do things.
Yeah.
And if someone turns out to be a shitty person, like you let yourself be sad, you let yourself feel the way that you feel, but over time you heal, you learn things from it, and then you realize that you didn't die over it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I've had some people really walk all over me and I'm okay. And
Yeah.
there's something about that that really helps to quell the OCD of like, you didn't die,
Yeah.
the world isn't over. You're
Hmm.
still out there, you're still worthy of love, you're still trying. You haven't shut yourself off. If anything, I've opened myself up to the world more. Yeah, and it makes the idea of making mistakes a little less scary every time. It's not to say it's
Yeah.
not scary at all, but it makes it easier to sit with the anxiety a little more.
That the point of you saying that, going on dates and really getting to know people is, it was like an exposure for you. And if you think about, like, I mean, I can when I go on Instagram and see people's stories, I mean, at least once or twice a day I'll see someone's story about how bad it is in the dating world out there, and
Oh, it's
how
a nightmare.
scary. Yeah, and how scary it is, and how it was just better 50 years ago, and all this. Just, I see stuff like that all the time, and it really does shape, like, your own experiences aside. When you see things like that, whether you're single or you're with someone else or whatever the case is, it really does shape this negative thing on top of something that already, like, naturally is hard to date, and to date in a landscape of, like, social media and swiping and whatever. To have relationship OCD on top of that, you may feel the urge to just, like, you know what, like you said, you just wanted to retreat, and I'm just not going to get close to anybody. I'll just stay back here and you guys can play the game.
Yeah.
Did you ever have that, like, with the fact of, like, society and the way it is right now with dating?
Oh
Did
my
that play
God,
an
yeah.
extra role in, on top of your OCD?
Totally. I think, the more like avoidant year of my life happened a little bit before it, but when it comes to like putting yourself out there again every time that you get your heart broken, yes, absolutely. You have to kind of be like people have really gotten good at faking emotional intelligence or faking a sense of closeness, like to the point that it's very hard to tell the difference, at least like especially when I was early in and I didn't have as much experience of dating. It's easier to be tricked by people,
Sure.
and it makes you get to a point where you feel like you don't know which way is up anymore because you're like, how do I know that this person is a legitimately good person versus someone that's just really good at hiding it? And the reality is that you don't know. None of us know, you know, like we all do our best to gather information and be smart about it. But ultimately, some people are really
Yeah.
good at hiding their shit. And all we can do is our best. And so, yeah, that part definitely is hard. I think the other thing that's hard is like in the social media landscape. I mean, long before that even, we've always had this like idea of like love and dating is supposed to look this one way, you know?
Right.
And if it doesn't look that way, then it's not actually good. And then you throw in like the wellness movement, which for by and large is a good thing, but will also, you know, like with everything, you always get like some toxic positivity and some crap
Of
where
course.
there's like this mix of like, yes, we're all learning how to keep our standards high and take care of ourselves, but we're also getting to a point where we're not allowing other people to be flawed human beings. It's like the
Hmm.
second that someone breathes wrong, you're supposed to jump ship, you know?
Right. The
And
ick, right? It's the ick.
exactly. And
Yeah.
it's such a fine balance because, again, I'm not saying that you should tolerate shitty stuff from shitty people. Please don't do that.
Right.
But it's this like tightrope balance. And so you have all these like conflicting messages of like, you know, like stuff is supposed to be like stable and calm, but also the movies are telling you that everything's supposed to be big and magical, and also you need to forgive people, but also they need to do everything perfect in this stage, and also this and also that. And I mean that's dizzying for anybody, but again
Yeah.
with OCD that amplifies, you're like, I feel like everything I'm doing is wrong because someone out there is telling me that I'm doing it wrong, and
Yep.
two people with completely opposite opinions that are both considered experts are telling me that I'm doing it wrong.
Yes.
And you have to like fight your way back to trusting yourself, which again, when you have this stupid little thing in your head, is really fucking hard.
Yeah.
And if you have relationship OCD, it really amplifies it because you're like, I'm not experiencing this the right way that I'm supposed to. And
Hmm.
then also, if you try and talk to friends about it, like, you know, there are some people out there that are really good at listening and understanding, you know, this is not my lived experience, but I can empathize or I can at least like sit with you through it. There are some people that are like, well, clearly you're not actually into this person, or clearly this, or clearly that. And it's just like, well, shit, like, what am I supposed to do? Like,
Yeah.
I've realized how much advice and information out there is counterintuitive to the way that OCD works. And so I've really, really leaned on my therapist and like really learned how to take a lot of advice from people outside of that with a grain of salt. Like if you do not experience OCD, like I appreciate your opinion, but I have to kind of sit with it carefully because sometimes what works for you is actually the opposite of what works for me.
Right.
And so I don't know, that's like a lot of information just to spill out, but that's kind of how it feels. It's just dizzying, you know?
Yeah. Well, that was like you hit it on the head with the fact of the matter of like we live in a world where it's endless information from endless experts, and what you did ultimately coming back to like you and your personal
Oh,
experience
yeah.
with your therapist who knows you, you know, coming back to home base for yourself. Like, this is me, this is my experience, this is my therapist who knows me really well, and she knows OCD really well. This is what I'm going to stick with. And this is where I'm going to use this as my drawing board instead of going on the internet and trying to figure out what every expert says about everything all the time. Because it really is, like you said, it is counterintuitive because OCD, most people who are out there making this type of content, they're not making it for a specific person. And there are just a billion different types of people, um, 8 billion types of different people. And it really comes down to your experience, what works for you, and having the emotional intelligence to know who to speak with and talk with, I think is so important with OCD because 95% of the people that I hold close to me and I love um, did not have the things that they should have said, or like the things that actually would have helped me with OCD. Now it's a little bit different because, I am helping the people that love me to understand me better. But um, having the people in your life that you rely on and holding them close who can understand you, can understand OCD to a certain extent, and using that as your weight rather than just hopping on the internet and trying to look for that reassurance of like, oh, why is it like this, or love should feel like this, and this, like that is so, for somebody who has relationship OCD and probably doesn't know how to deal with it, like that is probably what they're doing, which is going online and trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And it's not to say that I never do that. I still seek for reassurance. Like, because
Sure.
again, like these are hard subtypes to deal with, you know, because again, it's attacking something that you desire. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we all want love, we all want to feel close to other people. And so to have this thing that's like constantly attacking that, it's painful and it sucks. And so again, I still totally reassurance seek sometimes, and it's
Mm-hmm.
something I always continuously have to work on. Like that's part of the journey of OCD.
Yeah.
Like you can have all your seemingly like shit together in terms of like having a good therapist and like, you know, having your good like medication and stuff. That doesn't mean that it's not hard sometimes, and doesn't mean that you're still gonna like, you're never gonna stumble with it. Like I
Yeah.
never want to put on like an image of like this like perfectly like I have healed myself and I did it, and yeah, like it's a forever ongoing process, and
Yes.
I need to be at peace with that for my own sake, so I'm not hard on myself. And also, I don't want other people to be hard on themselves because of where they're at in the process. So, but I do feel very lucky that having a therapist definitely makes a big difference in terms of the language that I have around it, in terms of being able to recognize the patterns and
Mm-hmm.
recognize like, oh no, this is OCD, or maybe this isn't a person that I should be taking their word as gospel from, because I know that this is not how I'm wired. Like it definitely really helps to offset that massively.
That is so just important in general for people to, I think, understand when it comes to OCD. And the fact that there is more conversation about it to hopefully change the landscape, I think, when it comes to having these conversations with people in their real day-to-day lives, not just like online. But your podcast too, I actually saw, I don't know who it was, so forgive me for that. It was somebody that you had in your podcast. You had somebody who had OCD.
It was
um
vacations.
yeah,
Yeah.
the fact that like even on your podcast, which talks about music, right, and just life in general around like musicians, right, and talking about having OCD as like a conversation, on the podcast, like, is that something that you ever would have thought would have happened like 5 years ago?
I guess no. I mean, I definitely went into the podcast wanting like mental health to be a thing that's talked about more, just in the sense that like the podcast really again focuses on lived experiences, and I want to create conversations around those experiences that help destigmatize, whether it be OCD or grief, or for people in the LGBTQ community or people of color, like whatever their lived experience is, I want to be a platform where they can voice that and hopefully destigmatize aspects of it for other people that have that same lived experience. Um, but yeah, for me, like I still remember when the like PR person for vacations reached out to me and they were like, yeah, like so Campbell, the lead of the band, was writing these lyrics about his like recent OCD diagnosis. And I like immediately messaged back. I was like, I have OCD and I talk about it openly. And so through that, like they were like, okay, then like we definitely need to get him to do this because he'll really enjoy it. And we've actually now become friends. Like Campbell's now a friend of mine through doing this interview. And
Wow.
yeah, I don't know if I ever expected a few years back that I'd get to do this, but it made me so happy that I did. And I
Yeah.
love seeing art that talks about our story, like our stories. Like I recently, I know that you saw this, but I posted about watching the film for Turtles All the Way Down.
Yes.
Um, I didn't realize there was a book about it. I didn't even know that John Green had OCD. But when the film started coming out, I think like No CD was like posting about it too and stuff. I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I need to watch this movie. And I cried so hard watching it. Like I actually initially recorded a video of myself like reacting right after, but it felt a little too raw to post because I was just like bawling my eyes out. But I was
I
like,
get it.
it literally is the first time that I have seen us represented correctly.
So
I've
true.
never, ever, ever, ever in a film or television seen it. Now, of course, again, I've seen artists like that write music, like people like Campbell from Vacations
Sure.
or like Julian Baker write about it in music. But to like see someone in detail show what like rumination feels like, for
Yeah.
example. And even though like there's parts of it that are like hard because like it's not a fun thing to have, but for them to ultimately be like the whole message of the film is yes, you have OCD, but you're still a full being and you're still going to live a normal, meaningful life. Like you're still going to have a career, you're going to have,
Hmm.
a family, and all this good stuff's going to happen. And also, she's such a full character. She's vibrant. Even like seeing a character like her be seen as desirable to someone. And
Yeah.
like I think there's one point where the guy that she likes in it says like I like the way your brain works. So I was like, if you want
Yeah.
someone with OCD to fall in love with you, say that. That's take
Yeah.
notes, everyone. That is like the most like healing shit that you could say to any of us because you're like, oh, you don't think that I'm just a like broken little toy. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That.
That is so
But
true.
yeah, but just it felt so good to see that for the first time. It was like, I wish that I had that when I was a teenager.
Yes. Yes. I did. I loved that post because
Yeah.
it's, I totally relate to that. Like I cried the first time I saw it and I was like showing everybody in my life. I was like, that's what it's like. It's not just like wanting to keep your desk neat. It's not just like
No.
wanting to like, step the right amount of like, cracks on the sidewalk. Like it's so much more than that. And it's so debilitating. Like my dad knows like, how much of a struggle OCD has been for me throughout my life. And like there was one point where he had to like walk away. He was like, I can't watch this. Like I need to come back to it. And I was like, that's
Mm,
just, could you imagine living it? Could you imagine living it? Because
yeah.
it's so hard. And the fact that you're right, like I didn't realize it was a book either. And John Green, I mean, really having the emotional capacity to put himself into a character, write a book around it, make a movie, and then I mean, I think it came out at the perfect time. I think there's so much conversation around OCD happening now that wasn't happening even during the pandemic, like 5 years ago or 4 year,
Massively.
whenever, so like it's such a good time to start talking about it. I mean, because I think we're now entering a more enlightened era of being able to have conversations that are hard and taboo. I mean, there's so much taboo in OCD that needs to be talked about because it's not the people with OCD that you need to arrest and put inside of a padded cell. They're actually the furthest types of, like, they're the furthest from that. I'm really glad that you shared that too, because especially on your platform where you have different types of people who are interested in the musicians that you're interviewing and music in general, that's probably a different fan base than like a mental health just only podcast. So
Yeah.
it's really cool for you to even be having those kinds of conversations on your podcast, on your page, to really get other people like curious about, hey, like, what is that? Maybe I know somebody who has that, or somebody I love has that. Like, let me learn a little bit more about it.
Massively, yeah. And I mean, for me, the two do generally go hand in hand because there's so much about like mental health and like the difficult experiences that we go through that get translated into art. And art is the thing that
Mm-hmm.
we often lean on to feel seen and to heal ourselves or to escape or whatever. So I really wanted to center on the way that those two things connect to each other. Also, I really commend John Green for being willing to be as raw with the experience of OCD and getting so into detail about it. Because even for me, I'm very open about it by and large. Obviously, I don't talk about every detail of my OCD because I think we all also have a right to like our private lives and the things that we keep close to our chest. But it's a scary thing to like really open yourself to that degree and really invite people in to be like, no, it's like this. Cause sometimes there's that fear of like, how are people going to receive this? Are they going to
Mm-hmm.
meet it with compassion? Are they going to meet it with belittlement, like what, and I still sit with that. Like I never want people to look at me as less capable because I have OCD, or like I'm this completely incapacitated person, because I'm very much not. And also, there's so many of us out there that have OCD, that like we're so part of society that we're not like a liability, and we are, we're very much normal, but that fear is still so normal that you're like, are people going to not understand this to such a degree? And
Mm-hmm.
like, fortunately, I've seen a lot of people meet it with compassion and understanding. I think a lot of people that are, in the creative world, luckily, are starting to understand it more and more too. So that gives me hope. It's still nerve wracking, but I
Yeah.
also, and again, I've learned again to not share everything, because again,
Mm-hmm.
it's just nice to keep things to yourself sometimes too. But at the same time, I also want to be brave even when it's hard to share, like,
Yes.
because I wish that I had that for myself. I wish for other people growing up with OCD to have that, to kind of get to have a jump start on healing, because they can recognize something as OCD, to give themselves more grace too. Like I
Mm-hmm.
used to get like extra time for exams because of my OCD in school, and I'd always feel like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like I was like, you don't have like ADHD, you're just nervous. Like why do you need
Mm.
this extra time? And so I'd always try and finish in the time that I knew all the non-neurodivergent kids got. And I'd be like proud of it and be like, see, I'm just like you, and I can accomplish everything in the exact the same way. And it's only recently that I've been, and because like I realized I started to hate myself because of that. Because on the days where I couldn't be productive,
Yeah.
or I was just more tired or whatever, I'd be like, you're so unproductive, you're lazy, you're ungrateful, you're not doing enough. And then I was like, hold up, my brain is different, like I work in a different way. I ultimately still do the things that I need to get done, and I do them very well. And I have enough of a track record of doing things well to
Yeah.
know that that's the case. I graduated top of my class in university. I'm an award-winning music interviewer. I've still been managing to get some really huge bands on my podcast. So like I get shit done. It's not like I don't, but I'm finally again learning how to give myself grace for the fact that I work differently. And it's such a balance, cuz like I want to give myself permission to work differently and function differently, because I
Mm-hmm.
need to do that for my own sake. At the same time, I also want people to understand that just because I'm approaching it differently doesn't mean that I'm not going to get equally good results. So it's such
Yes.
a tricky balance, but
I
you
love
know,
that though. You are not incapable. You operate differently. We operate differently than just someone who's not neurodivergent. It's just like that picture of like I don't know if you've ever seen it, but like the fish, the bird, and like the giraffe are like standing on a grass, and the teacher's like, all right, you're going to be tested based on how well you can climb the tree. And it's like only,
mm,
there's not every animal can climb the tree, but like, the bird won't be able to swim underneath the water. The bird
yeah,
may climb the tree or get to the top, but the fish may not. Like everybody has their own timeline. Everybody has their own way of doing things, and it does not make them any less capable.
I think the fact, like, for even like other neurodivergent people I have in my life, like people on the autism spectrum, people with ADHD, like
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them create some pretty beautiful and incredible things. And I think sometimes having people whose brains work differently can yield some really interesting results. Like it's not, most of what OCD is debilitating, but there's these sort of like side effects. Like for one, I think that a lot of us end up being much more empathetic people,
Mm-hmm.
because when you live through this thing, you can be a lot more understanding and non-judgmental of other people that are living through similar things, even if it's not OCD specifically. you know
Yes.
um we can really be safe havens for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that also the one upside to being like hyper analytical and self-aware is that we see details and things that other people don't always see. Now
Mm-hmm.
that can easily get out of hand if you don't kind of know where to stop overthinking, but I also know that I pick up on smaller things than other people do, which is part of what makes me a good journalist and makes me a good interviewer.
Hmm.
Like I notice the details that other people don't, and because of that I'm able to have these richer, deeper conversations with people that they appreciate, and that's made me like be in demand with like music PR because they
Hmm.
know what I'm able to deliver. And part of that comes with who I am, part of it comes with being neurodivergent, and part of it comes from like the things that I've had to do to take care of myself and
Yep.
like therapy and everything. Like some of those byproducts trickle into my professional life. um I don't know, I'm just like very sensitive to details in a way that I actually really enjoy. Like I get more excitement out of small things and big things alike than other people just because I see them. And so
Right.
again, and I don't know if I'm like just out here like trying to like convince people like see, but I do think it's true. I
No.
think that neurodivergence can be an asset too, and it can
Hmm.
be or not can be, it is a beautiful thing as well, in addition to the parts of it that are very difficult. And I hope people realize that, you know.
100%. It's so funny. I was just going to ask you like what you would like to leave here with, you know, as like a footnote for people. And I feel like that was just that was just like a beautiful like, hey, by the way, you know, I want people to realize that no matter what, you are gifted. You know, if you even if you struggle with these kinds of things, I mean, little Sophia, she probably would have loved to hear that. And I know I would have, you know, and so that's like that's a beautiful thing. And if we start to like embrace, because people always say, you know, um, there are no positives to struggling with OCD, and I do think that there's that fine line where you can look at it and say, well, if I didn't have OCD, would I be as empathetic? Would I be someone who really thinks about the end result? Would I be somebody who cares this much to have these types of conversations? And for me, I don't really think that I would be. It's because of the way my brain works too. Because you know I was diagnosed at a very young age, and so I this is kind of like where I am and always have been. And so it's basically like it's a debilitating thing to have, but on the same side of that, you know, you are able to dive deeper in life. You are able to dive deeper with people, and sometimes it's like, well, is that worth the trade-off? I mean, it's not for me to say, but I think at the end of the day, we shouldn't just beat ourselves up and struggle through the mud with OCD. Like we should also look at ourselves and say, well, hang on a second. Like I am a person who's worthy of love and acceptance and compassion, even if they don't understand what this is, because even I don't understand it, you know. So that
Yeah.
was really well put.
Thank you. And it gives me a lot of purpose. Like, because again, part because it's healing for me, but like, I feel like I'm able to have a deeper sense of empathy also towards like other minority groups, like, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
allyship to, again, like various like communities of color or to like the LGBTQ community. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not to say that I like suddenly magically understand someone else's lived experience. You can't unless you actually live someone's experience. But I don't know. I think it just makes me more open to like the realm of possibilities, the realm of types of people that exist, and to not look at people as like these weird anomalies, but rather look at it like, oh, that's your lived experience too. What do I need to know about it so that I can be supportive of you and give you a voice in your own stuff?
Yes.
And again, that gives me a lot of purpose. And maybe, and again, a piece of it is probably wanting to heal that little like neurodivergent girl that like felt like a weirdo growing up. And so if I can like be even a small piece of helping someone else feel a little more valid in their lived experience, it's like I'm kind of giving that back to my younger self as well.
Yeah. That is a beautiful thing. And I think that's really all we're trying to do as adults who have this, is to kind of heal the inner kid, and hopefully other people can kind of take something from that. I need to go back and listen to that interview, because listen to the whole thing, because I'm really interested to just see someone who's in that space, because I, you know, I'm in the the same space, and to be so open and talk about it like that. I really want to be able to experience that. So I love what you're doing, and I mean, you're absolutely super good at talking. It's so weird. If I knew that you were an award-winning interviewer, I would have said no to this interview because
Oh, sure.
I would have been too scared to interview you.
The trick is starting to talk when you're able to start talking as a child and then never shutting the fuck up. That's
Okay.
the trick.
That's
It's
incredible.
being the really annoying kid. That's all it is.
I love it.
So,
I mean, you're doing a great job. I'm so thankful that you came on here to chat with me about your experience, with OCD, and hopefully people can really walk away with something from this episode that makes them feel a little bit more compassionate towards themselves, really.
I hope
So
so.
thank you, Sophia. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure and really, really great to get to have these kinds of conversations. So thank you.